Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Risk Matrix with myself, Dr. Martin, and James Junkin. Hey, James.
Hey, roll tide. Summer's here, baby. Back from the beach.
Roll
Fired up, ready
Tide.
to get back to work.
Roll Tide. Softball's over, and now we got the long season between softball and
Football, baby.
football.
It's
So
coming.
I
It's
I, I
like a
got mine
long
this
lost
spring.
friend that you haven't seen in a while, right?
Yep.
When it comes back. At least that's the way
Well,
I feel.
I
But
I
I'm
got
sorry.
mine this spring, and you're the fall guy with the football. So roll tide, and hopefully we're coming into a good summer for everybody that's listening to us. Today, you just have James and I, and we're going to talk about an article that James posted recently about getting in tough economic times and getting a budget for safety and making sure that you get what you need, some tips and tricks. But before we do that, I just wanted to mention that we're powered by Veriforce. We're also sponsored by Veriforce this week. Coming up soon is the ASSP conference, American Society of Safety Professionals. And James and two of the other strategic advisory board members are speaking there. And Veriforce is also going to have a booth. What booth is that, James?
What was it?
1201.
1201. That's right. That's right. 1201. 1201. Come by 1201. We look forward to meeting you there. A lot of our strategic advisory board members will be there. There'll be a bunch of folks from Veriforce that are there. I know Dr. Daniels will be there. Stephen OJ will be there. They'll both be there with their books. So it's a chance for you to visit with us down in Orlando, get your book signed from Dr. Daniels. I know we'll be giving some of those away complimentary. You can also order that. I'll be there hanging out as well. And we'll have additional information about a potential Risk Matrix Live, baby, from Orlando.
So just to remind our listeners also, this is episode number 98. 98, James. We've been doing this 98 weeks in a row. We got 99 coming up next week, and then we're going to have our big 100 show. And just as a teaser, everybody that comes in there, they are present during the taping of that 100th show. We're going to have a $100 gift card to Amazon to celebrate that show. So everybody that comes will be thrown in the drawing for that. But we hope you listen to 98 today, 99, and then 100, and then beyond. But that's a little tickler for our 100th episode.
We also have some exciting news from our last episode from giveaways from Veriforce for our loyal listeners that either come on and attend live or like or share or comment on our post. So I want to give a shout out here to some of those listeners who will be receiving some Veriforce merchandise. Carl Klein, David Bates, Hunter Bradley from Old Mississippi. Hey, Hunter. And April Snyder. You all should be receiving something in the mail from the team here at Veriforce. Thank you for listening. And if you want to get into the opportunity to be able to get some of this Veriforce swag from us, make sure that you're liking, commenting, sharing our post on LinkedIn, or just attending live here during the session. Drawings happen every week, and we'll announce them at the beginning of each podcast.
Great. Thanks, James. So let's roll right into this, James. Let's talk about this article that you wrote recently and why you wrote it. It was about tough economic times and making sure you get what you need for a safety budget. How do you swing things when things are tight? So I'll let you introduce that a little bit.
This always comes up whenever you see financial challenges. I get a bunch of calls. People, it usually starts off with, man, I got laid off, or I think I'm about to be laid off. If you got something that I can do, or you got recommendations, you know anybody that's hiring, or hey, they just cut my budget 50%. What am I going to do? I already was struggling related to budgetary pressure. So, you know, in these difficult times, we got to fight for our budget, right? We have to be able to go to the corner office and make that argument that safety is a value. It's not an expense, it's investment, and it's a strategic investment. So I thought that was a good idea right now. A lot of things in the news, tariffs in the news. We've all been through the inflationary pressures. The price of oil, for those of you in the oil and gas industry, has been trending down, which is great for people going on summer vacations and traveling. Those expenses correspondingly are decreasing, but it creates some angst as to what my budget's going to be for the rest of the year, or even if I'm going to have a job.
Right. Right. So let's talk about that a little bit. I actually posted an article recently on return on investment and how do safety professionals show return on investment so that they can justify the numbers that they're asking for, even if they're slightly smaller than they were before, or maybe a little bit more tuned in. How do you do that return on investment so that leadership understands that a little money now can save us a lot of money later?
Well, I always like to be over dramatic about everything, right? You've known me long enough. I make a big deal out of nothing, but hey, you know what costs? You know what really costs money? You know what wrecks budgets? Seriously injured and dead people. That'll wreck your budget. Nobody has that in their budget plan that, hey, 3 months from now, we're going to have a catastrophic injury to a worker that's going to tie us up in court for the next 3 years. And at the same time, it's going to cost us 3 or 4 major clients. And we're going to watch $1 million a month walk out the door in potential revenue. So yes, I think that's sort of the extreme, is when you're making that argument is, hey, the worst case scenario here is this. But is that the most likely scenario, right? Probably not. When we look at fatalities as bad as they are across the country, we're still talking about 6,000 comparatively when you look at that number to other incidents and the number of workers that are out there performing tasks every day. That's still a very, very small percentage, even though each life loss is tragic. So where are we seeing financial pressures, like increased healthcare costs? Okay. Increased premiums, insurance premiums that you have. Increased cost of goods for PPE and things of that nature. So recognizing that we have these challenges, I think, as safety professionals, that we don't live in isolation within an organization. An organization has a budget. An organization does not have unlimited resources. So you got to convince people to continue to invest in that.
So James, I'm just going to roll it back here. You're talking about serious injuries and fatalities wrecking the budget, right? Well, that's true. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I don't think, and I'm just going to throw my personal opinion out there. I don't think that management does well with the scare tactics, right? Oh, somebody could die. Oh, we could have a serious injury. Oh, look, it would be $1 million. I think one of the things that we need to do if we're going to start justifying budget expenses, or even if they're not exactly what we want, we need to put it in terms on return on investment that leadership can understand, right? Or in a scaled down version that's not a scare tactic. The last thing you want to do is come in as a safety professional and try to scare the hell out of the leadership, right? Because then they're just going to think, what? You're the boy who cried wolf.
All the time.
Or Chicken Little, the sky is falling. And I've seen this a number of times with safety professionals, that they're so intent on showing whatever budget item they have versus something catastrophic, they don't get listened to.
Well, I agree with that 1,000,000%, right? And I have to be cautious about that, because in safety, we do this all the time, and we do it in training. We always go to the worst case scenario. Like, I remember when I first got into safety, we had this, I had to go take an H2S class. Well, actually, when I first got in the oil business, and it's been many, many years ago, like 1996 or something. We had an H2S instructor, and everything that we were going to experience, we were going to die. You get to work in the morning, you're not thinking about H2S, you're going to die, right?
Yep.
You leave your monitor in the truck, you're going to die. And that dude had me so stressed out after 4 hours of that. I called my wife at the time and said, hey, I'm going back in the Navy, man. It's crazy out here in the oil field. Everybody dies. I mean, they just die. And after a while, it loses its effectiveness. So I agree with you. I don't think it's a time. It's one of those cards that you need to play, but you need to know when to play it, right? Whether it's in training, you're talking to the CEOs. What's more likely to occur? Well, if we slack back on our injury prevention, then we see a rise in injuries, knick-knack injuries. What does that do to our EMR? You know, increased workers' compensation, loss of productivity, decreased employee morale where people don't want to work with you, things of that nature. So I think proactive incident prevention is part of what you do to help fight for the budget, but it's not the only thing that you can do in order to get people to invest. We also need to come up with ways to reduce costs, right? Costs are real. We have to write checks for costs. So while we're preventing these things that are in direct costs come all the time. And I think one of the best places safety professionals can start when it comes time to tightening the belt, so to speak, is look at your PPE budget. Look at your PPE budget. How are you maintaining that inventory?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say, look at your PPE budget, but I'm also going to say, look at your PPE, look at your equipment, right? One of the things that I've done in the past is to show that the equipment that we do have, that we're taking good care of it, and we're right on top of what the useful life is, how it's being used, when it's being used, when it needs to be replaced, so that we're not wholesale asking for big line items. We're actually showing that number one, the worth of our job, that we're on top of this and we're managing the things that we have been given, such that when we ask for something else, leadership can trust us to put that into the same organizational category and to care for it.
You know, we have to, when we took over very large safety department a few years ago, their PPE budget and inventory was out of control. You know, we always want to give workers their PPE. You cannot charge workers for PPE. Even though some people in recent audits think that you can charge people for PPE, you cannot charge people for PPE, right? But when we did inventory in some of their vehicles, this guy had like 27 pairs of leather gloves and wanted to have leather gloves, but they were new. And every time we're buying those gloves, that's $7 a whack. So getting control of your PPE inventory is a way to reduce costs. You can do that through inspections, through holding people accountable, by actually tracking your PPE inventory and knowing, hey, I've issued these people, 14 different pairs of safety glasses in the last week. What's going on here? And putting countermeasures in place. So just like we do with hierarchy of control, when we're looking at PPE, we don't want to scrimp on PPE. We want to get people the right PPE that they deserve. But hey, put it out for bid. See if there can be substitution there where things that you're using PPE for. Is there another vendor that can get you something that's just as good, but maybe not have the same name brand where you can save some expenditures there.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw what David Bates put in the chat there, James. Well, let me read it to you. An indirect cost to injuries and illnesses that has crept into the equation and is very real. Vetting, rating of hiring clients. It can really cost an effect in securing future jobs for a company. And I think he's kind of alluding to number one, the rating of subcontractors, but like that, as you said, the EMR that's rises, or the TIR, or the safety metrics. One of the ways that we can show our worth is to lower them such that we can get jobs, right? The companies can get jobs.
Absolutely. And David Bates, thank you for commenting and being a loyal, not only member of our strategic advisory board, but also a loyal listener here at our podcast and great contributor. Absolutely, I would say in the corner office, for me, that's one of my chief concerns. From a moral standpoint, I always want my workers to go home safe from high hazard jobs or from any hazard job, right? We don't want people to get hurt. But from a business standpoint, the indirect cost to worker injuries is definitely the potential for you to have a lower score in a rating system that ends up costing you business, right? Mm-hmm. That is very, very real. is something that's talked about pre-qualification systems all the time. I know it's in the mind of just about every CEO that's a contractor, and probably a lot of people that are listening to us right now, Dr. Martin, is, we want to have our injury prevention efforts here, but at the same time, there's a business side of this safety. So if I start cutting back, is it also true that maybe we do less site inspections? We don't, optimize our training the way we should. We have reduction in workforce where workers are working longer hours, et cetera. Could that savings now, that direct cost savings, ultimately be an indirect expense that we really can't afford because we're fixing to lose a bunch of business because of it?
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about site inspections, I kind of see site inspections as an assurance that you are keeping on top of the items that are real, real present danger hazards, right? The more you do, the more you look at your job sites, the more you look at your tasks and your jobs, the better handle you have on the decisions that you make that will cost money down the road, right? And it also helps you put things into perspective against, what's happening on another job site or what's happening as a whole in the company. So I'm a big proponent of site, increased site inspections being one way that you can actually start to hone in on the things that are more important than others, that are more prevalent, and to make some better decisions about where your money goes and the relative risk.
Right. Here's another way I think safety professionals can help optimize their budget is organization of the training schedules. Organization of the training schedules. That's one of the things at Veriforce when we worked with SafeLand about our basic orientation program and the minimum times that we were going to set for people to be required as far as the conduction of the class was concerned. We originally a few years ago, that was almost 8-hour classes, 7.5 hours. I think it's down to 6.5 hours, includes a lot of things that's in there. But what we realized was we need to try to be able to get as much training done in a single day as possible. And it's not the cost of the instructor. It's not the cost of the training materials. It's that worker we're paying $35, $40 an hour coming to training. And I'm not saying it's not worth the investment.
Might be overtime too.
Absolutely. It might be overtime. So how much can we get done? Things that used to frustrate our clients is, hey, we do this one class, we got this 4-hour class here, and then we let them go. And then tomorrow we bring them back for another 4-hour class, or we bring them back for a 2-hour class. Think about how you're putting your training schedules together so you get the most maximum use of the worker's time, right?
So let me chime in on that, right? It's not just a back-to-back trainings or trying to, put things together for an 8-hour schedule. It's also looking at your content, right? You and I did this recently for a client of mine where we looked at what the hazards were that they were exposed to and then tailored the training to those hazards, right? So, fall protection can be a myriad of things. But if a worker is never going to be exposed to a flat roof on a job, do we need to spend an hour on flat roof fall protection?
Absolutely.
I'm not so sure that's the case. I think we need to focus on the things, the hazards that they would be exposed to and the application of the equipment to the same. And that can save you time and money.
And that's in keeping with the spirit of the standard of the OSHA regulations, of OSHA publication 2251. We don't have to train people on every unlikely scenario that they may come across ever in their career. We're talking about the situations they face now, today, with a present employer on your job site. We used to run in that with confined space. People we'd go out there and look at some of our competitors that were doing confined space training, and all of a sudden they've got a week-long class, and really all these people are doing is something very simple that could involve a horizontal entry and a horizontal rescue. We don't have to train everybody on high angle rescue for something that they're not going to run into in this environment. The other thing I think when you look at training and prepackaged training is this, a lot of time there's redundancy, right? You'll see in courses, if you do a lot of training, hey, we covered this in this course, like for example, H2S, where we mentioned respiratory protection. Well, if I've already covered that material in one course and I'm also teaching respiratory protection behind it, can I combine some of those concepts to cut down on length and repetitiveness, and that optimizes safety training, which reduces your expenses.
Right. And I agree with that. I think, when you do kind of put together a few different instances where, say, for example, you need respiratory protection knowledge, right? As long as you organize it such that your audience understands that the applications are this and this, as opposed to now we're talking about respiratory protection. I'm not really sure where this fits, right? So there's a limit to how you can tailor and organize. You need to make sure that it meets the audience and it is received in the perspective that you want them to receive it.
Absolutely. And look, I think there's a place for e-learning within anybody's training portfolio. It's just like everything else in life. There's some people that are really good at it, and some places it's really appropriate. I'm gonna quote you. I'm beginning to quote you more often, which is scary. It just depends, right?
It's not scary to me. It's not scary to me.
It's scary to me. It just depends. Just depends. But anyway, when you're looking at your training solutions, I think that's appropriate. It just depends, right? But in areas where we could leverage technology and free up time for safety professionals that are used to doing this in person, hey, it's okay if some of this awareness stuff gets taught in an e-learning format. We talk about training, that's a whole different episode. But I like to sit down with professionals sometimes in my training class and say, okay, what's your definition of the difference between orientation training and awareness level training? And you get all these different definitions and opinions, and they're all right and they're all wrong. Why? Because I can't really go to an authority, a national authority like OSHA that says, hey, okay, for general waste safety awareness, how long does that course need to be? What's the content need to be?
Depends.
It just depends, right? So look at what you're doing from a syllabus standpoint, what the content is, and things that can be taught in the e-learning format. I think it's probably something you could switch to and maybe save you some time and budget, especially if you're using third-party instructors.
So, I just want to wind back to, when I was saying, it doesn't really help going to management and using scare tactics, right? Because you don't want to be Chicken Little and the sky's falling or the boy who cried wolf. You want to make sure that you're putting things in terms that management can understand and also reach them on their level where they understand that you're trying to look for ways where you can reduce costs and what areas are super important, right? I think you get a lot more believability about being reasonable and street smart about your budget items.
Right. Right. This is another area that I think is often missed. We know about the hierarchy of controls academically. Like we ask everybody that listen to us on this podcast, where does PPE rank in the hierarchy of controls? I guarantee you almost to a person are going to say it's the last line of defense, right? That has been coined. If there was safety money on the back of it, it would say the last line of defense, right? Like we have In God We Trust. That's what it'd say because everybody knows that. But often I see that only really implemented in practice. That PPE isn't really the last line of defense. It's the first thing we reach for because we really haven't done an appropriate hazard assessment, and PPE is relatively cheap in initial cost compared to engineering controls.
Right.
But this is where you can make a fight for your budget and also to see safety as a strategic investment, if you can do some analysis and look at, hey, would an engineering control save us money in the long run? One of the ones that comes up all the time is hearing conservation, right? When we look at hearing conservation, most everyone is issuing earplugs. And if you're outside oil and gas in general industry, you're probably doing baselines and annual audiograms, right? And there's an expense to that hearing conservation program over time. When you start looking at what you're doing for baselines, what you're doing for annuals, what you're doing for training, what you're doing for the PPE that you need to issue people, you know, compare that to a one-time expense of an engineering control when we're talking about, you know, soundproofing something or modifying the whatever's making the noise or adjusting people's schedules. That's a way you can demonstrate financial savvy to the C-suite of how that single investment may actually save you money over time, even though the initial investment may be more than what you're doing, at least, you know, within the first few months or annually when it comes to implementing a hearing conservation program. I don't think we talk about engineering controls enough when it comes to the financial side of a safety department.
Right. So I did do a post on return on investment just recently, probably last week, I think it was. And I mentioned that earlier in the show. And I had somebody clap at me from the great beyond there on LinkedIn and tell me that, you know, safety things are an investment and we shouldn't have to show return on investment. Well, unfortunately, sir, in the real world, you do have to justify things. And, you know, I don't think that's a bad thing that you justify an engineering control over PPE by showing the cost of this versus the cost of that. I mean, I understand that everything we do for safety is an investment. I understand that. But when it comes right down to it and money is tight, you have to justify almost everything. I mean, I've been in,
look, there's
I've
no
been in
bucket
cases
over
where
here.
everything.
That was obviously, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm going to be rude. Okay. Whoever said that obviously has never had to write a check in a business, right? There's no money tree sitting outside where we just have unlimited resources. And when you're looking at the HOSHA hierarchy of controls, resource allocation is part of it, right? Sure, we could, particularly relates to chemical exposures, man. We might could come in there and put in an engineering control and reduce risk to zero, but that might cost us $200 million. So on the other side of this, PPE may be appropriate because that's what we can afford to try to protect our workers. There is not just unlimited resources in an organization. Now, I think that's probably the biggest gap and why safety often is one of the first places people cut in downturns and economic times is because we don't do a good job of understanding that we have a role in the financial success or failure of this business. We do not have an unlimited resource. If you can learn as a safety professional to speak in the language of business, right, then you can make justifications for your budget, your role, your staffing, the hierarchy of controls you want to implement. And now you're talking about something that goes into the total organizational culture, right? And not just what we're doing over here in safety in a silo. You want to take a question?
Here's one from Jennifer. Something I have done to save money on chemical exposure is to work with the distributor on the formulation to find something less objectionable, which is reduce my waste expenses and PPE costs. There you go, substitution.
There you go.
Right? Replacement or substitution. People do this all the time. One of the classic things that has happened over the last, I mean, it probably more than 10 years, maybe 15, 20 years, are parts washers, right? We've gone from straight up TCE and PCE solvents to wash parts, and now we have greener solutions, which lower costs, lower waste, create a better footprint for us. So yeah, Jennifer, I mean, that's a terrific way to show your worth is, we can do this better. And we can rely on our vendors to help us do it. That's what they're there for.
Absolutely. And it's kind of counterintuitive to our training. Our training, when we talk about substitution, we always talk about substitution is related to reducing the hazard and exposure. How about also substitution reduce the cost? I think that's fantastic, Jennifer. Absolutely.
So what else you got in that article there, James, that you wrote?
Well, I think the other thing is, as a safety professional, even though we wear a lot of hats, as you go around and you begin to realize these cost savings, I think you need to record that. That way, when you have time with management, you can say, these are the initiatives we put into place. We streamline our training processes. That way, we reduce this number of people in seat time for redundant training that we eliminated. And that saved you X number of dollars right here. We were able to take our safety training program and present it to our worker comp carrier, and they cut our rates by X number of dollars over this year, and they'll do it again next year. We implemented an engineering control, and even though that engineering control costs us money right now, it saved you this over the next 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
being able to document it and being able to communicate it, I think is paramount, because even though you're doing these things, if you can't explain it to management, it's really not super effective for you fighting for your budget.
Right. Marcus Stein, thank you for chiming in on site inspections. This is kind of one of the things that I was going for. I'm just going to read his comment, and then I'm going to make a comment back to you, Marcus, hope that's okay. I'm going to do it anyways, even if it's not. Safety inspections are huge, especially when done by someone who's not at the site on a daily basis to bring fresh eyes into perspective. The gist behind that is fix it now, don't fix it later, right? If you have somebody that's looking with a fresh set of eyes on a regular basis, you may find preventative maintenance that's going to cost you less than if something breaks down. You may find hazards that can be mitigated before they become a problem. This is exactly what I was talking about, Marcus, is, don't say, well, I can't do as many inspections. I think you have to look at how many inspections are going to help me help my bottom line. And that's ways that you can do it. Preventative maintenance before things die, making sure your hazards are stopped before they become a problem. Terrific. I love the comment. Thanks, Marcus.
One of the ones we did, it just dawned on me when you said that years ago, is we started adding to our inspection process, have workers turn the truck off. I can't tell you how many job sites I go to and trucks are running all the time. Diesel trucks, gas trucks, air conditioners running, they never turn them off. Well, not only does turning them off help the environment, it also helps our fuel budget at the end of the year. So I think that's outstanding, being able to add things like that to your job sites inspections that help the company that may not necessarily be a component of safety.
Yep. Jennifer's got an organizational, Jennifer Burke has an organizational suggestion here, and I think that's a really good one. Changing bottles to specific colors and setting rules on which bottles can be used together and which cannot reduces the probability of adverse chemical reactions. Totally agree. Right there, you're preventing incidents and accidents, right? You're keeping it simple, stupid, KISS. And, I'm sorry I used the word stupid, but I guess the more we make things easier for people to understand and to follow the rules, the less incidents that we're probably going to have, especially as you make the point with chemicals.
Human error. It's kind of cool how all this goes back and works together, right? If you reduce the likelihood for people to make mistakes, then they won't make mistakes. If you inject the potential for human beings to find an error, provoking activity or a provoking action, they're going to find it, because we're just human beings, right?
So when James says write this stuff down, I mean, write this stuff down, and you have to be your own best advocate for the things that you're doing to justify your job, to justify the steps that you're taking in order to make things simpler, more productive, less costly, etc. These are all things that you guys are suggesting that, you should be crowing about when it comes right down to it. Use the power of making things be in your favor when it comes to how they're perceived by management.
Absolutely. So we got any more questions, Dr. Martin?
No, I think we're getting kind of towards the end here, James, but this was a great show. I'm glad you wrote that article. If anybody else has some questions as we're wrapping up, please throw them in the chat. But we'll take this time to say again that Veriforce is going to be at booth 21. Is it 2101?
1201.
1201.
1201.
1201 at ASSP. Our 100th episode is coming up in 2 weeks. We hope to see you all there, as well as episode 99. Remember, if you are signed up and you participate in that 100th episode, we're giving out a $100 gift card to Amazon. Probably some more swag too. We'll see.
Probably some more swag.
But we certainly love that you participate. Mark asks, where do we obtain the article you mentioned? James, I think you posted that on your LinkedIn.
I think I posted on LinkedIn, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll repost it today, Mark, right after this. And it'll be on my LinkedIn page, and you can just come over to it and check it out.
Yeah. So thanks again for listening. And I just want to let you know that both James and I accept requests on LinkedIn. Follow our pages, like, subscribe. We're always putting out content, as is Veriforce, who we're powered by. If you like this, share it with a friend, subscribe to our show, participate every week. We love to hear from you. If you got something to say, send us a message. We're so thankful for our listeners.
Absolutely. Hey, we do this for you. Remember, like, share, comment. That gets you in the drawing for Veriforce swag. Engage with each other. I always like to see a healthy discussion that comes out of one of our podcasts where people are debating and we're all learning together and doing so respectfully. But once again, to echo Dr. Martin, thank you for listening. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. Hey, we're available over on the Veriforce YouTube channel. We're also available on the Veriforce webpage. On LinkedIn, this podcast gets shared on LinkedIn, and then we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So there's no reason for you to say you can't find our podcast. And your mama wants you to listen to the Risk Matrix podcast. Join in when you can. We thank you all for attending today. And until next time, y'all keep bringing those workers home safe from high hazard jobs, and roll
Tide,
baby. It's coming back.